Hello, everyone. It is Kenyon here. Basketball Rewind, of course. Guess what? I'm here. I'm here to answer the questions that you put out in the mailbag, go over some of them, give you my thoughts, my ideas ahead of the Raptors season, and yeah, let's get it started. I will say I'm gonna do my best to pronounce people's users' name as they come across. I'll try to edit the video so it will probably be on the screen what the question was, and so I'm just gonna go in order of what I see them and do my best. So, yeah, thanks everyone for all the questions and all the engagement. I really appreciate it, of course. So, without a further ado, let's go from start to bottom. Coach Bengolo, thank you for all of the comments, by the way. You did, you asked me a couple of ones, so I'm going to answer all of them. If the Raptors don't do a trade now, when do they do it? I actually tweeted back. I asked what specifically, and Bengolo, you said both. I said, do you mean like is there a specific trade like Dame or not? And you said like both. If we don't do Dame, like what do we do? So I'm gonna give you both scenarios. I don't think that they have to do a Dame trade. I think if they do a Dame trade, it has to be for the right price. I'm gonna be frank. Again, I don't like talking about trade frameworks and getting into the weeds of that because I think conversation gets bogged down. But I think the simplest thing, um, realistically, to get a Dame, you're gonna have to give up one of OG or Barnes, probably not both, and you're not going to be giving up. You're not going to be giving up Barnes and Gradey either. So it's going to probably be OG and Gradey and some sort of combination of other assets. You're going to give up, of course, Barnes and other assets. One of the challenging things which would allow us to keep a little bit more would be if we had more picks. If we didn't make some of the trades that we made recently. Now, this is not me trying to make, relitigate, any sort of recent trades or anything like that, but that is the truth because we don't even have a lot of seconds until 2026. Okay. Hopefully that answers your question. And thanks. I know that there's going to be other ones that you asked, but yeah. Okay. Stevie. So that's Stevie underscore low. Thoughts on Precious's role going forward in a crowded front court. Where will he get minutes? So, gonna answer this in reverse. I'm gonna say where will he get minutes? I think the way that Precious can get minutes, as long as Koloko's on this roster, I think that the Raptors have learned that they're more committed to going with not necessarily traditional centers, but centers with size. I think Koloko's very fast, very agile on his feet, very quick-footed, very light on his feet too. And it's interesting because he can catch the ball. He just had trouble finishing. Precious also has trouble finishing. But my point is that I don't think he's a center. You can make it work for a little bit of time, but I think long term he's not a center. I think he's more of a forward, but like a tweener forward. He could probably play center in spot minutes, but I don't think you want that long term because I think that over the course of an 82 game season, he'll get beat down if he had to do that game in, game out, night in, night out. What is his role going forward? I guess I kind of answered that a little bit, but on this specific team, if he's going to carve out a role, this is what I'll say. I think that Precious will have to do a much better job of simplifying his game, and I hope that the coaching staff helps with that. So if he can, I think Daryl, you want to shout him out. If Precious can come into this season and he can do two things really, really well. If he can, sorry, I'm just putting my phone on airplane mode. If he can hit corner threes and attack closeouts with decisiveness, you don't even worry about passing, just those two skills. And when you're at the hoop, dunk it. No more layups allowed. If he does that, I think he can carve out a role and get to the second contract fairly easily. Okay, thanks for the comment. James Welch, Welchy, or I guess it's Welch J at the very end. Thank you for commenting, James. How much have casual Raps fans spoiled Raps chat forums by stupefying discussions. Uh, this is a good. I actually answered James. Very sure. I said this is a very good question. It deserves a more in-depth and separate response. I'll try to give a short response. Sometimes it makes it not really fun to have discussions. I think these days on the internet, some people are more interested in trolling or having um incendiary discussions and not that are just engaging. I like debate. I like going back and forth, but I like it done in a respectful manner. I don't have to agree with someone, but I think it has to remain respectful. But also I don't want to argue all the time. It's not fun to argue. I think the other thing, James, is that people take one thing that you'll say. So it's almost like you get like aggregated without me being big enough to be aggregated. So I'll say in a sentence, I'll be like, "Oh, I really like Scottie Barnes. I think Scottie Barnes could do all these things." But I'll say in the next sentence, "Yeah, I think that he needs to, grow and work." And I'll get killed for it. One way or another. Usually the other way, because they'll be like, "You don't believe in him." It's like, no, I never said I didn't believe in him. So I think surrounding young players, you get it a lot because people tend to be very sensitive over young players, which is funny because it seems like people forget the age of other players because some people will be like players like age 26 and they'll just like still treat him like a young player, but then like all of a sudden it's like a player's like 1 or 2 years older than that, and it's like I don't know. There's a weird discourse around how people view and treat players in general. I really don't like it. I think you can have honest discussions without making personal attacks about players, or with people that you're talking with. And so I guess overall to sum it up, it has made it less fun, but I still love basketball. I still love learning about the game. I'm not always right, but I'm here to learn. And I think I'm doing a pretty good job of learning the game because I watch the game quite a lot, and I used to play a little bit too. So okay, next question, Bengolo. You asked a couple more questions. So again, thank you so much. Um, so let's put that on the screen right now. Is it becoming a must-trade situation with Dame? I kind of answered this part of the question. Considering the contract situation and too much relying on guys to improve a lot, or do you think we're okay with the current roster if it stays the same? I'll start with again in reverse. I'm perfectly okay if the roster stays the same this year. I think that Siakam is going to stay, and I think that OG probably will be going in one way, shape, or form. So from that standpoint, I just don't see him being happy and staying. But it's possible that he stays if they want to pay that money. I think money gets tight when you're doing that and adding Gary Trent. Now, regardless of how people view Gary Trent, I don't know if the Raptors view him in the with the highest regard. Comparatively speaking to other people on their roster, I mean, if you're saying like who would they rather trade, it's like say OG versus Gary, it's probably Gary. I mean, you heard from like the Raptors side, you heard him in trade rumors a lot last year. I think Gary's a really good professional and stuff like that, but you get my point. I think there's some cleanup that we need to do, but those aren't the major moves that you're probably talking about. It might not be. I think for example, Boucher, Precious, as I talked and answered someone else's, I think it was Stevie's question. I think I don't know where they're playing on this roster. Um, because neither can really shoot the three well. And they kind of do overlapping things. Um, and you already have other guys that could potentially do it well. Because if you're, picking crunch time lineups where you need kind of a combination of offense and defense, emphasis on the offense, you'd probably put other guys ahead of those two, potentially Jalen McDaniels being one of those people. And so for that reason, I think that there's some cleanup work to do, but largely I'm happy with the roster. I'm okay with the roster moves. It could have been better for sure, but I think we'll be a lot better than we were last year overall. When I say a lot better, I don't mean like records wise. I expect us to be maybe marginally better, maybe closer to 44 wins. I'm not like going crazy and saying like, oh, we're gonna win 50 wins or something like that. But I think based on the fact that this is getting a little long, but you could probably take off the top of my head eight to 10 games where we couldn't buy 5 minutes from our bench. We lost those games by like 5 points or less when we were up. And so having a bench that can actually, be serviceable, um, where between at least the starters and some of the bench units that you can kind of put out there, there's obviously there's always going to be a drop off, but there's going to be a less of a drop off. Yeah, I mean, I think it would be good. Is social media ruining the way? This is from Bengolo again. Is social media ruining the way that we evaluate players? Yes. I'm gonna direct you to one of my most recent videos where I didn't get a lot of views, but I really enjoyed the discussion, and I'm really proud of the video. It was myself, Beyond, and Coach, and we discussed whether TikTok and 2K is ruining the NBA in terms of a consumption standpoint. I think Trey also was there as well. He made some really good points in terms of the positives, but I think when you're only consuming things in bite size, it changes the way that you evaluate players. I think it's good for the game overall because it grows the game. But I think that there's like a maturation process of understanding the game, especially if you're only consuming it in that and you kind of like play, but you don't really play enough to really understand the nuances of like footwork or, different like counters and whatnot. At the same time, you don't want to make the game so inaccessible. So again, overall, it's probably a net good, but it is shifting the way is what I'll say. So yeah. Um, Next question, Bengolo. What will the Raptors look like in clutch situations compared to last year with terrible clutch play? This is a good question. I think this is probably the biggest question. I think it's a little bit different. What I would say from this perspective would be simple. Is not going to be simple. I expect a lot more ball movement, a lot more plays being drawn up. You would expect one of Barnes, Siakam, or OG to get that final shot. How they get to that final shot, I think that there's ways that you can get them coming off screens and stuff. But I think you're going to see the unless we have someone other than Pascal. Not that there's anything wrong with Pascal, but it's just unless you have someone other than Pascal, I think that they're going to trend away from just like ISO down the end of the clock, dribble, 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 dribble shot. And I think that there's even when you have that talent, I still would prefer players get shots in ways. Now, if you have to do it and that's the only thing that the defense is giving you, your first or your second option's gone, that's all you have, great. Next question, Bengolo. Who is going to be the most improved player? I'm assuming you mean on the Raptors and not NBA wide. Sorry, I'm just gonna like this here. So I'm gonna go with the Raptors. I think the most improved is gonna be a sneaky one. I think it's gonna be Christian Koloko. I'm really high on Christian Koloko. I think he put in work in the summer in the right ways. I really like when players first start to simplify their games. Work on for him. It was get the strength up. And then obviously get the easy drop step, working on touches on the rim. He worked with Chris Johnson, who's worked with LeBron James and a lot of other NBA players. You can definitely look that list up. But I think the point is that that's probably who I would go with. Barnes hypothetically could get it, but I think that he has to do a lot more because his even if you feel like his production stagnated or not, for him to get most improved on this team, he like the amount that he would have to grow because he's already scaled up from a minute standpoint would have to be much more significant. And I just think that Christian Koloko will have those opportunities, especially when he didn't last year. So it's gonna look significantly different. Okay, which team is going to surprise this season? That's a good question. Let me just look at the standings. I know I did a standings watch yesterday. So I'll give you an East and a West team, just to be fair. I'm just gonna look at the standings. Sometimes it's hard to like remember like a team just off the top of my head. So, but again, thanks for the question. I think in the East, the Pacers actually might surprise people. Now, on one hand, I would say like it's not really fair to say that they're gonna surprise people because people really expect them already to be good, or better, I should say. But yeah, or the Knicks. So those are, I guess, my two. I'll add two Eastern Conference teams and two West teams. So the Knicks or the Pacers will, I think, surprise people. I don't think the Raptors might surprise people just because I think a lot of people, think that they're literally. I've heard people say that they're going to be 11th in the East. I don't see it. But yeah, like and from a positive direction, I think the Knicks or the Indiana Pacers would be the teams that are probably going to surprise people the most from the Eastern Conference. From the West, that's a little bit more interesting. To me, I actually think that the sounds funny, but I do think that the Thunder might be in for a very interesting season this year. I think that they're definitely going to surprise people. And I'm going to go with a team that people may not be expecting to grow quite as much, but I actually would go with the Houston Rockets. I do like their pickups. I'm not like the biggest Fred VanVleet fan, but I think overall on that team and how they've all worked together this summer and stuff like that, I think the only thing that they kind of missed out on is getting that Brook Lopez. But I think Dylan Brooks coming off the World Cup performance that he had, he's definitely going to have the cojones, this year and the confidence, which we know he doesn't lack of. So I think that those are going to be my two West teams. This is not necessarily playoffs or whatever. I just think that like they might surprise people with how good they are. And I'll add like one other like interesting thing. I'll say like I'm really curious with New Orleans with their two recent injury concerns. I'm really curious how they end up this year. They're a team that I thought that they would take the leap last year. They didn't really, partially because of injuries, and of course, like again, they have injuries for different players. But yeah, where do you think we will finish in the division? And that's by Bengolo again. Thank you again for all the comments. Where do you think we'll finish in the division? So again, I have to just think a little bit here, but I think that the Raptors could be. If I'm not mistaken, we're in the same division as Detroit, so I think that the Raptors will be third in the division. I think that New York's going to be really good this year. I think Boston's obviously going to be maybe not 57 wins like last year, but say 54. And so when that happens, it's just hard to beat that. But I think we're going to be better than the Nets. And again, I think if I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong, but if Detroit's in our division, which I do believe they are, um, I would say that we're definitely going to finish above Detroit. Um, Okay, next one. Sunny VF. The username is Tree Point Play. I like that. Okay, when is Scottie Barnes in his actual? Sorry, when Scottie Barnes is in his actual absolute prime, what position will he be playing? Sorry for botching the reading of that. I'm a little bit tired right now. That's a good question. I think it's possible that Scotty could play point guard, but again, you're looking at time. And so for him, he would need to commit a lot of work to the ability to dribble and handle the ball at a much better, cleaner rate. I think, you know what? I'm actually going to like pause right around here to show a couple examples of like because people like to compare them to like LeBron's or Luca's, what those guys look like very early on in terms of being able to dribble in their careers. I'm not going to show Scotty, so I'll show that right around here. I'm not going to show Scotty because, like, I don't think I need to, but I just think that right now his dribbling, his footwork, and all those type of things are quite clunky. And so if he wants to be a point guard in his prime, you need to work a lot on like the core strength and the other things like that. For me, I lean more towards him being a point forward of some kind. If in his absolute prime, him hitting his 90th plus percentile outcome, where he can maybe not shoot the three absolutely amazingly, but like I don't see him ever being a 40% shooter from deep, but being decent. Yeah, I think it's probably a point forward of some kind. All right, next question. James Welch. Again, thank you for the comment. The Raptors were known as a great development organization a few years ago. Why has their development sucked in the past 3 years? This is actually a really good question, James. I've actually done some research on this, and I'm still digging through it. It seems like a lot of our top tier developmental pieces, from a staffing standpoint, they left. And so they left after the championship year, of course, for better jobs or whatever. And we never really replenished that pipeline. I think you actually follow the amount of people that we employed and stuff. We're kind of, in a sense, running on a skeleton crew. And that's challenging. It's challenging to still squeeze out the same level of development. I think what was done is there was a decision to be in organization that invests more on analytics. You see that with the 905 coach that they hired a couple years ago, who's like never really had coaching experience, not really a basketball player as far as I know, but really, really smart individual with his analytics background from the University of Toronto, and that's Eric Corey. Um, Now, here's the interesting thing is that there's nothing wrong with that, but sometimes if you're so hyper analytical with everything, whether it's the Noah board or all these things, or people may not even remember, but there was the IBM Watson investment. And you're trying to do that to substitute the human component or the experience component, you might run into a couple problems. And I think that that's what we've run into. In my mind, shouldn't just be on the coaching staff. You should have an actual like the same amount of money that you would invest on the Noah board and stuff like that, you should be investing in a true developmental department. I think player development is super important. And like I said, whether it's Patrick Mutombo, Jama, who's now come back, and others, Stackhouse, shout out to him as well. I think we had a much better developmental team that was stronger. I do think that we have had some recent, whether it's scouting or player development or all that, I think we have had better investment over the offseason. And that's been a kind of sneaky under the radar, hasn't really been reported on quite as much, but I do see it getting better. But again, things take a little bit of time. So yeah, we will see. Next, James Welch. What is Gradey's high/low upside? Could he develop into an all-star type of player? All-star type of player, that's tough. I don't think his like part of all-star is how people perceive you. I think Gradey's going to be very popular, but I don't think he's ever going to have the type of game where he's dunking on dudes or whatever. I think the way he plays is a lot more smooth. So I don't know if I see. I think he could get and play at an all-star level. I think he could get an all-star thing at some point. But I don't. It's tough to gauge right now because he hasn't really played an NBA minute. What I will say is my player comp to him is a combination. It's changed a little bit. He has a little bit of Reggie Miller in his game. He actually watched Reggie Miller growing up, and mimicked his game. I know others have said Clay, and so I would say almost like a mixture between Reggie Miller, Kevin Herter, and I guess maybe a Gordon Hayward, but I think Gordon Hayward was much bigger and much better defender. This is pre-injury Gordon Hayward, of course. And so we'll see how he fills out over the next little while. But I think Gradey's going to be really, really good. I ideally like to see how he grows. I think he's coming in as a very polished prospect. And I think that the fact is that if you have a polished prospect, people automatically think that their ceiling is low. And it's not necessarily the case. And so, again, sometimes people knock players because of how they look or whatever, because he's a little skinny or whatever. And he's not actually that skinny if you look at his overall body. He has like his legs, his foundations. You can tell he works on those a lot, and that's a good sign. I think his body will actually fill out pretty well. And so I would say the floor would be, uh, maybe a Kevin Herter type with a little bit of better defense. I know people say Kyle Korver, but I don't think that I think he already has much better defensive hands than Kyle Korver. And some people even said he has the best hands in the draft. And I would say that he has pretty good hands. They're definitely up there, especially in transition and stuff. He has nose for the ball. We'll fill up the stat sheet. High end, yeah, sure. I'd say, your Clay type where it's like he could be, um again, pure projection. This is just for fun, people, but maybe he could be that second type guy because he does have more than just pure outside shooting. I think he can, he has a little bit of a pull up game. He already attacks closeouts pretty well. So I think his game will come together quite nicely and quite quickly. Two more things left. Okay, so James Welch. Why have the Raptors not fired the front office staff yet? I think I don't think that Ed Rogers is happy, but these decisions are tough. And also, you have to remember that from a Masai standpoint, whether you're in a Masai camp or not, he's quite tied. Number one, from a championship standpoint, if you win a championship, you get 5 years. Is what I say. We're in year 5, so he's still on that sort of thing. Now, after year 5, if you still mess up or people aren't happy, then you've kind of lost your leverage, you've kind of lost that whatever. But I think you deserve 5 years after a championship to kind of do whatever the heck you want to do before you get serious again, and you can experiment or whatever. But yeah. The other thing is that obviously whatever I wasn't in on the negotiations, but whatever happened with his contract negotiations, it sounds like there was some sort of potential for a baked-in ownership stake that would be vested over time. So if that's the case, again, that makes it a lot more complex. But we'll see. I mean, if Masai does the right things, you know, it's I think he'll be fine. I think if there are scenarios that he stays, and I think that there are scenarios where he gets fired at the end of the season, or at the very bare minimum, say your GM is gone, but Masai is still here. Masai is probably not going to have a chance to pick the next GM. So it could go in either direction, people. Next question, Pascal Stan. And I think it's Lisa OVC. Thank you for the question. Good seeing you. Appreciate it. And stay cool as a cat. I'm sure you'll know what I mean by that. Thoughts on our trio of Pascal, OG, and Scottie. So for the longest time, before we made the Pirtle trade, I felt like this is something special, and I still do think that it could be something special. The challenge is that I think OG wants more than perhaps his current offensive ability will allow, because I truly think that he sees himself as better than Scottie, and I don't think he's a number one. And I think he would struggle to be a number two. That's just, but I think he would be the perfect number 3. And to be fair, if you look back at the championship team, he wasn't really there on that run. He was in the hospital. It's not his fault or anything like that, but yeah. I think Scottie is a really good roller, and I think that there's certain things that they were showing as in January where the team was coming together before they made the trade for Pirtle. The problem is that when you got Pirtle, now the spacing kind of doesn't really make quite as much sense. So I know some people are like purely in the like get rid of Siakam, blah blah blah. Some people never like Siakam; he's a selfish player, all this kind of stuff. I'm not into that. What I will say is that again, it's just like that trio that you just named, Pascal, Siakam, Stan, is not the issue. The problem is pairing that with the right center. Pirtle probably wasn't the right center, but he is a major upgrade. I think right now to make that work at some level is really, again, as I keep hinting, it comes back down to Scottie Barnes and his development. And it's not just going to be the opportunity that he gets on the court, because he will have that opportunity. It's going to be his development. So it's going to be his development, his willingness to work with, his own trainer or with Raptors staff, or seek out help, going to, whether it's like like his peers, Jalen Green or whatever, going to different camps like they're going to with Steph and whatnot, or whatever he feels like he needs to do. Getting the best footwork and the best core strength work and conditioning that he can. And I think the other thing is the cardio. I think one of the things that I noticed, maybe it's a pacing thing, but and he was pacing himself, but like there were times where he would like kind of almost be like floating through games. And if he's going to be the best that he can be, and if he's going to do what people think he can do, and myself included, I think yeah, I think that for him to be the best that he can be, that conditioning needs to be there. So it's possible. I think he can get there. I think it's just challenging to get there this year. This is what I keep trying to tell people just before I wrap up. This is that yeah, like Rome wasn't built in a day. Whether it's making a move for a guy or trading a guy away or trading for a guy, team building is a more fluid process. Now, I do think that there's moves that we can make that could be a bit faster, and I think that we could probably go away from always trying to make the home run deal. But I think that whether it be development or otherwise, I think people just need to be a little bit more patient with this team, and also just learn to enjoy basketball again, because people don't really seem to enjoy it. With that being said, this has been my first mailbag episode. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed going through all the comments. Hopefully, this isn't too long. We will see how long it is. And yeah, I enjoyed it. Some of these questions I definitely want to dive a little bit deeper into. So I definitely will in the future. Take care. Hope you're all well. Like, comment, subscribe, of course. And yeah, take care. Bye.